Here we go. And for all people who registered, I always send out the recording and our slides and the questions, the Q&A. So people don't miss anything. We have an action-packed session tonight, and just as we usually do, and I welcome everybody to join us. This is, I bill as the ultimate of, you can make your own electric generating station by having solar plus battery storage. The second part of this presentation is by myself. I've been looking into using electric vehicle batteries to power your house when the grid goes down. And a lot of manufacturers now, auto manufacturers, provide the equipment to make this possible. I'll go through a few of them. So tonight we have Mike Winka. This is part 2 of his talk. He started last December, a whole month ago, talking about all the basics of electrification by using solar panels, and it was really great. And tonight he's going to continue that discussion. I wanted to put a little plug in for our next webinar, which will be in 1 month. And we have a couple that will talk about electrification of their own house. So they're going to give a case study of how to do it. And with that, I guess we can start. Mike, why don't you take it away?
So this is the second part of that Solar 101. This is the battery part of that. I have some sections for questions. I hope they stay relatively non-complex. I'm not a real expert on the battery side, but familiar enough about how they work. So again, my best advice, hire a reliable professional. In the last presentation, I gave a couple of places where you can go, Energy Sage, Solar Review. They're all vet some of the installers through there, or you can look through the BPU database on all the systems that have been installed in New Jersey. You can search by your municipality and see if you know people that have installed solar or batteries in your community. So my goal is to get you good information. I'm a little bit cautious about residential battery storage, but just like anything new, the more we can advance this, the better off we're going to be. And so just to refresh some basic terms, kilowatt hours is the amount of energy we use. In SI terms, it's joules. Kilowatts is the amount of power. It's energy divided by time. Kilowatt hours divided by hours. Really great in the English units, but in SI it's joules per second, and that's a watt. So 1,000 watts is a kilowatt, 1,000 kilowatts is a megawatt. You'll hear about that. And then just a little equation, think about, 10 100-watt light bulbs on an hour. That's a kilowatt hour. You pay about 19 cents. You could run 71 14-watt LEDs for an hour, and that will cost you 19 cents. So energy efficiency is really important. And LEDs have changed the market. So that's what we can do with heat pumps and solar and storage. So just a couple of things about storage. Really, if you have a time of use rate and a demand charge, that's really where they shine. Or if you have some reliability issues. So if you're at the end of a line and your power goes out, you may want to think about battery storage, even a standalone system. Steve's going to touch on that. Residential customers, we pay one fixed rate. It includes the demand charge and the energy charge in there. Commercial customers, so if you're a small commercial customer and you want to reduce your demand charge, batteries might be the way to think about that. So commercial customers pay an energy charge, $1 per kilowatt hour, and they pay a demand charge. That demand charge, if you think about it, is I run a restaurant. My peak hours are 5 p.m. to midnight, but I want fresh baked bread for my customers. They really want that to have their hamburgers on. I'm going to pay the bakery to stay open when it operates just from 5 in the morning till 12 noon. I'm going to pay them to stay open. That's what the demand charge is. You're paying the power plant to stay open to deliver your demand. So net metering only applies to the energy portion, the dollars per kilowatt hour, not the demand charge. That's where batteries shine on reducing the demand charge. So first things first, you definitely need a building construction permit, really more so on the local fire code because there's important issues about fire safety and how you have to configure the system. You may, depending on the configuration, need utility interconnection. Um, I'll talk about that in the end, and Steve will talk about that somewhat too. Battery storage incentives are being worked on by BPU. For residential systems, they're not here yet. I think what I read in the stakeholder proceeding for battery incentive program is 2026, but I can check that out and get you back information. There is a 30% investment tax credit, even for a standalone system. You're not required to be connected to the grid or to have a solar system. So, and that 30% is after state rebates. So you have to figure out how you want to calculate that 30%. First things first, you have to be installed by a licensed electrician, and in New Jersey, you have to have a licensed home improvement contractor do that. You really should think about if you're going to do all this stuff, electrify. Really, the first step is take a look at your panel. If it looks like this on the left-hand side, you definitely want to upgrade it. There is in the new energy efficiency program, if you're going to do some energy efficiency, there is money for upgrading the panel. Even if you're adding EVs, there's money to upgrade the panels with a make-ready program from the utilities, and BPU also and DP has incentives for panel upgrades, and there's a 30% investment tax credit. So if you're thinking about it, now is the time to do this. It's not going to get any better in terms of the incentives at this point in time. So just to talk about the grid. And the reason batteries can help out in this situation, and one of the things they can do. So you may have heard this term thrown around called the duck curve. So you can see this curve here, looks like a duck. This is a day in the life of load in California. So this gray line here is the load, typical load in California on this March day. People wake up, they start turning things on, they're going to work. Things even out, they're coming home and turning more things on. That's a typical load curve for a shoulder month in March in California. As they started adding solar, what happens is the grid people don't see solar as generation. They see it as you're turning off their lights. They see it as reduced load. And as California added more and more load, that load decreased. And what happens at the end of the day is the sun's going down. Now, all of a sudden, it has to pick up that peak. You see this ramping rate that needed to be matched. And you may have heard in California, there were these times when they had really hot weather, they were saying, don't charge your vehicle during this period of time, turn off these things. Well, that's because of this ramping rate that they needed to respond to. And they put out a bid, which is what they're supposed to do. Most of those bids got responded by natural gas peaking plants, but now they're being replaced with batteries. And they're competitive with natural gas in this range. The grid really likes to see this sort of smooth curve. It wants to be, so it doesn't want to be going up and down and all around. Grid operators want to smooth out that curve. So if you can take some of that solar energy, that excess solar energy that you're generating, and put it here and manage this from this high peak to this smooth out curve, that's what batteries with solar can do for you. Other technologies can do that, but batteries and solar do that pretty well. So what are we talking about with storages? It's just a way to capture energy for later use. It's mainly for electricity when we talk about solar, because oil, coal, and natural gas are already stored energy. It adds flexibility to the grid. You can use energy when you're needed if you don't have it available. If you store it, storage can make the grid more reliable and resilient and more flexible, but at what size and what cost? Grid size storage is pretty much cost effective. Stuff at the smaller range starts to become less so. But again, it's all in the use case. There's different ways to store electricity. So the most majority of stored electricity is pump hydro. In fact, in New Jersey, we have a 400 megawatt pump hydro facility, George Creek, which is up in Warren County. You can see here, these are the New Jersey goals, 600 megawatts by 2021. The majority of that was made up by existing pump storage, and then 2,000 megawatts by 2030. Thermal storage is this new kid on the block that's coming along, storing energy in the ground, geothermal systems, geothermal thermal networks. It's the new thing in terms of being able to store energy, especially in a campus setting, which was running with a combined heat and power natural gas system. How do we change over to be able to run that heat load for the campus? Geothermal and energy storage networks are the thing to do, especially for campus settings. These capacitors and flywheels are mechanical ways, but very short seconds of stored energy. Batteries are that intermittent area between large long-term storage and short-term storage. So batteries can fit the bill between very fast responses and somewhat long responses with their battery loads, but durations are 8, 10, 12, 16 hours as opposed to pump storage, which can do days. So there are different types of batteries, a whole bunch of different chemistries. You may have heard the cobalt issue about mining cobalt. So that's lithium, nickel, magnesium, cobalt, but they're being replaced by lithium iron phosphate, which has a better power density, lower efficiency, but better power density, greater thermal response, not the problems, not as much as the problems with nickel metal cobalt. So storage is a lot more complex than solar. Solar is essentially plug and play. You set it up, you have some maintenance issues, minor maintenance issues. Your inverter probably will go every 5, 7 years, maybe 10 years. With battery storage, you need to do routine maintenance. You need to monitor them for them to operate properly. If you're not somebody that's good about always running maintenance, running your hot water system every year and cleaning it out, cleaning your heating system, well, batteries may not be the thing for you to take on right now, but there are service packages out there that you can think about doing. So just some other ways that you can take your solar energy and store it. So you may have run into your office building and it's very cold in the morning. Well, that's what they're doing. They're taking energy and storing it in the walls. So you can take your electricity, you can take your electricity from your heat pump in the morning and store it in the walls with thermal energy. You can do the same thing by storing that electricity in your hot water system, especially if you have a heat pump hot water system. You can store it in the vehicles and you can store it in batteries. So there's different ways, even at the residential level, to think about storing the energy that you can produce from your solar system. So just a little bit about code issues, and this is really, a lot different than just solar on your roof. So this is the section of the code where you find electric energy storage. You need fireproof containers. You may need ballast if you put it in the garage so you don't run into them. That drywall has to be fire rated insulation. In addition to a smoke detector, you have to have a heat detector and ventilation. And this is a changing area in terms of the electric code. As technology changes, they're changing this portion of the code. So something to, if you're thinking about battery storage, talking to the contractor about the current code, there is a limit. There's these threshold limits on batteries and the amount of batteries that you can install at a residential level. And for lithium ion batteries, it's 20 kilowatt hours, which is about the average use of an average home. So you're at the average use here. You can install more, but that puts you into a higher category in terms of safety and the other things that you have to do with the system. So a couple more terms in addition to energy, kilowatt hours, and power, kW. You want to look for a battery system that has an energy to power ratio that's greater than 2. You'll see that as a selling point. Batteries also have this limited depth to charge. You're not getting 100% of what you put into the battery out of the battery. You're typically getting 85. Now, you're probably newer batteries, the lithium ion phosphate batteries are getting 90+% depth of charge. And that's related to the round trip efficiency. You're losing something when you charge it, you're losing something when you discharge it. So um, things to think about when you're looking at a battery system. It's also how much, what's the duration of that system? So you have 2, 4, 8 hour durations. How you can calculate that is the energy divided by power gives you the number of hours. We'll talk about, how much you can run the battery in power versus energy in a couple of examples in some slides. Battery life is typically pushing upwards of 10 years now, 10,000 cycles. They're probably lasting 15 years plus. I mean, your battery in your car, the Tesla batteries have been coming out with 200,000 miles. The goal for those batteries are 1 million miles, and I'm sure they're going to get there. You got to think about things like watts and volts and amps and amp hours. And we'll talk about AC and DC couplings just so you get familiar with some of the things that contractors may talk to you about. And really, it gets down to what do you want to do with batteries? Do you want to just extend the solar of your day a little bit at the peak because you really run more of your electrical equipment when you come home, or you run it more in the morning? Do you want to run those shoulder months with shoulder hours with batteries? Do you want to run your home when there's an emergency? Are you at the end of a feeder line where where you see more grid outages than most people? And how much of that power do you want to run? That all depends on the cost, and we'll talk about cost in a couple of slides. So, or do you just want to have the newest technology? We'll talk about this new thing called grid vehicle to grid, V2G or V2 load. Steve's going to talk more about them. I'll just touch on them, and then Steve will get into the more part of that conversation. And then you got to think about when we talk about the power needs, there's also this thing called power surges. So your heat pump comes on, it has a surge in the beginning. So instead of needing 3,000 watts, it may need 5,000 watts to turn on. So you have to calculate that if you're thinking about running all your critical loads when the power goes out. And the one way to think about that is, the power is equal to volts times amps. So if you're running something that's 120 volts and 20 amps, it's going to have a 2,400 watt power draw, 2.4 kW. So if you have a battery that's 5 kW, that has a 5 kW power output with 10 kilowatt hours of usable energy, again, that efficiency of that battery, you can run 5 kW. You can run a piece of equipment that has a power draw of 5 kW for 2 hours, or you can run something that has 1 kW of power draw for 10 hours. Just, there's different ways to run that piece of equipment. And just some examples, your heat pump has a power needs of about 3.3 kW. You can run that heat pump for 3 hours with a 5 kW 10 kilowatt hour battery. You can run your 30-watt TV for 33 hours or your 20-watt fridge for 50 hours, just to give you some concept of that, how long you can run that battery with the power output that you need and the energy that it can provide. And there's different ways, there's different calculators that are out there to calculate those wattages if you're looking for that. So just an example of how you put that together. So instead of talking about it, it's nice to think about it. Most people talk about it as water flow. So here's a battery that's 60 megawatts. So this is a large scale battery. You can run it full out for 4 hours. And that little pool at the bottom is 240 megawatt hours of electricity. Or you can run that battery at 8 hours at half of that power outage. And that pool at the bottom is still 240 megawatt hours of energy. And you see here on the right-hand side is that graph. The area under this curve, whether you're running it for 4 hours at 60 megawatts or 8 hours at 30 megawatts is all the same area under the curve, and that's 240 megawatt hours. So here's about cost. So in that first part of the presentation we did last month, we looked at a 7 kW residential system at $3 a watt. And if you're looking for that, there's a document out there by NREL. They publish every year the cost across the country. This is a pretty conservative cost. You can probably find systems at lower than $3 a watt installed. That's about $21,000. That 7 kW system will provide energy for an average home, about 9,000 kilowatt hours of energy. That's before the investment tax credit. So if you're adding a battery here, 3 kW, 6 kilowatt hours of energy, you're probably going to spend about $10,000. And depending on the coupling, you may spend a couple of $1,000s more. And we'll talk about DC versus AC couple and why you do that. So you're going to spend about $10,000 over that $21,000 just to handle about a third to maybe a half of your load in your building. And again, when you see numbers quoted, you'll look at, the storage system cost versus the entire installed system cost. And this little yellow bar is just the cost for the batteries. So sometimes you'll hear costs quoted as the battery cost. Oh, it's only $1,500. Well, that doesn't include all the other components that the battery needs and the installation costs. So typically you're running about $1,000 a kilowatt hour. And if you want to run your entire house on batteries, just on batteries, so you're going to double the cost of that 7 kW system. To store the amount of electricity produced by that 7 kW on a daily basis, you're going to double that cost to about $42,000. That's before the investment tax credit and before the incentives. And we'll talk about cost in a minute. So you can go to a bunch of different charts that are out there. This one is from Solar Review. There's another from Energy Sage. You can click on those. They update these routinely. They'll give you all of the systems that are out there, the chemistry that they use, the total capacity, the efficiency, the power output, the surge power output, and they'll give you the life warranty life, which they'll probably last a little longer than this, and the cost to install. And again, that cost to install is just this cost, not the labor installation cost. So you got to be mindful of what they're actually quoting you. So this is a chart from Energy Sage, probably the top 10 battery systems, about 10 kW kilowatt hours, so about half of the load in your home. 4 kW system that has about 10 kilowatt hours of energy output. So after the investment tax credit, you can see the price is about $10,000. And it's pretty similar across the board within a couple of $1,000s. The thing to think about is battery prices are coming down. So in this chart, I used this chart from 2020. It was quoting numbers in 2019. This is about the cost today, and I'll show you why in this chart. So prices were coming down, and then we had the shortage in supply. Prices went up for everything, probably related to the increase in natural gas cost, and the cost for oil went up to $100 a barrel, and gasoline and natural gas went up to $10 an MMBTU. But now those prices have come down, and prices are coming down and projected to come down. So by 2030, they're going to be half of what they were in 2020. So a reduction of 100% in 10 years. So here's what, just to get you familiar with a term of how you connect batteries, either AC coupled or DC coupled configuration. So if you have an existing solar system, you're typically going to do an AC couple where you have your system on the roof, generates DC power, goes into an inverter, you're using it, goes out onto the line. You can take power off the line and it goes to another inverter that inverts it back to DC to the battery. Typically, the reason you're doing that, you're already having string inverter. So if you're retrofitting the system, you have to add this component, these two components, an inverter. And once you do that, you're losing some energy, right? Just like your charger for your phone or your laptop, you feel that heat, that inverter is going to lose some of that energy. So it's less efficient, but it's more flexible. You have more options in this configuration. You also have some issues with net metering. And you may want to talk to the utility about how you set up. They may have a requirement for a relay put in here so you're not net metering power from the grid. If you're doing something new, a more efficient way to do that, a little higher cost, is DC coupled. So you take the DC power through a charge controller to control the charge to the battery. That DC goes to the inverter to the home, back out to the grid and back through this inverter. So you have one inverter, more efficient, less losses, typically in a new install system. But of course, there's always the hybrid system, which combines both of those. So you can take your power from the panels through a combiner box to the inverter in this hybrid system and it inverts it to AC. You can take that AC even from the wire line, convert that back into DC, back through a DC charger, through that charger control to the batteries, and the batteries can send it out as DC, which gets switched to AC back into this inverter and makes it all usable. So that's a hybrid system on top of the AC or DC coupled systems. So this is what we're going to start to talk about. Steve's going to take it after I talk about cost and a little. So this is vehicle to load, where you can run your house on the load that's being stored in your vehicle, DC power to the inverter to your load, which is your home electricity use, to an inverter that goes to the battery, that goes to charge your EVs, or you can go the other way, and this should say DC on one of these, DC power to the inverter. So you have a circle here. You may have heard terms that thrown around: vehicle to home, vehicle to load. That's what we're talking about here. You can do this. You only need a transfer switch to be able to do this. Then there's this term called vehicle to grid, where you take the power from your vehicle and you send it out to the grid. A different thing here, standards are still being worked out how to do that. This is going to be a game changer for the distribution system when you can take power from one part of the state, drive it somewhere else, and put that power into a distribution system that's totally different from where you took it from. So, you know, a real game changer in terms of storage and how the grid can be managed. Just to show you a discussion on the vehicle to load issue, or just the vehicle, or just sort of the loading issue on the system. So here's your solar panels, goes into a controller, goes to your string inverter, which is the typical way this would be done. You can go out to the meter or your panel box and you're using that in your house. If the grid goes down, all of this shuts down. The inverter shuts down this piece. It senses the grid is out. With this transfer switch, it automatically transfers that power over to this critical load subpanel. It still takes power from your solar panels, charges it into the battery, and that the battery then sends out AC load to your house. And whatever's on this critical load panel gets to run, but you're not running in parallel with the grid. You're isolated, or what's called an island mode in this situation. And you're running. When the grid comes back up, that goes away. And then you're running back on the typical system with the string inverters. So you can do that right now with vehicle to load, or solar panels to load. Just a couple of real quick slides on cost and simple payback from the solar presentation last month. Your payback is your capital cost minus your incentives divided by your revenues over time. The revenues are electricity and the SRECs that we talked about. So from that first part, we talked about a 7 kW system at $3 a watt installed, cost you $21,000. With a 30% investment tax credit, it's $14,700 net cost. Accounting for the ITC, the net cost when we had that graph a couple of slides back is about $10,000 for about managing half of your load in your building. So again, you're running about $24,000, $25,000. Your revenues are still the same. The revenues are the avoided electricity from that 7 kW solar system, generates about 9,000 kilowatt hours per year. So 9,000 times about 20 cents per kilowatt hour is $1,789 per year. You get these SRECs because your 7 kW system generates 9,000 kilowatt hours per year. You get at $85 a megawatt hour, you get 9 of those. That's $765 for a total revenue of $25.45 per year. Again, these are just examples, not exact numbers. So if you take that simple payback period equation, that $14,000 divided by 25.45 we showed last month gets you about a 6-year payback and a 17% return on your investment. Without the investment tax credit, it's an 8-year payback. Adding that battery that supplies about a third to a half of your load with the investment tax credit gets you about a 10-year payback, $25,000 divided by $2,500. That 7 kW system, if you wanted to run in the full load, gets you about a 12-year payback, an 8% return on your investment. That 7 kW system without the investment tax credit gets you about a 17-year payback. So the investment tax credit is very important. But again, a reasonable payback here. Payback systems, we talked about the battery system will last 15 years. Here, it's probably not cost effective to do something that has a payback system that's 17 years. Longer than your system life is not an effective way to use money. And here you have to decide, am I spending money on a battery system where my grid is pretty reliable? I really don't need to, run when the grid power is out. It's pretty reasonable. Do I want to spend that money here, or do I want to spend that money on a heat pump or a heat pump water heater? So here's a reasonable decision. You need to think about the cost effectiveness of those equations. And if you really want to start small, we can talk about a battery pack. So this is Ego's battery system. It runs all of your lawn equipment. They're little battery packs. This Ego system takes 4 of those battery packs. You can play with a battery system. You can run that so your grid power is down. This is a 3,000 watt system. You can run your extension cord to run your refrigerator or your laptop or a bunch of lights in your house. And you can see how, playing with that stuff with a battery get you a little more experience in running a battery system. And with that, we can stop and answer questions, not too complicated, and then turn it over to Steve.
Okay, this is Pat Miller. I'll moderate the questions as usual. If you have a question about this part of Mike's presentation, then please put it in the chat. We have a couple in the chat already. So I will just read the first one, which is from Mark. This is a question for Mike. Great presentation. My town of Ho-Hocus is not allowing battery storage in my garage. Do you know if that is a town, county, or state rule? I'm assuming not the state based on your presentation.
Well, I don't know if they can. You can't have more. You can't have code different than the state code. So in New Jersey, all of our codes are run out of the DCA and all the municipalities adopt and run the state code. And the state code is definitely is based on a national code, the National Plumbing Code or the Fire Code. I don't think they can do that, but I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all of the things about the zoning that might be in Hohokus. But from what I know about code, you have to run the code based on the state code. You may want to reach out to the DCA folks. DCA is the Department of Community Affairs. They have a section on code, and just ask them that question and they can provide the exact answer. Hope that helps.
Okay, thanks. And Betsy's asking, I think you mentioned a database, the BPU has a database of solar installations. Where can we find that?
So in my last presentation, I gave a slide. You can go to the Clean Energy Program in the solar program where it talks about reports. They do a report every month. That month shows you all the installation for that month. You can go back into their data set and they show you every installation they've had since 2003. They do it by residential, commercial, grid connected, whether it was a municipality, a university. They give you the size, they give you the installer, and you can sort all that out by municipality, and you can go down through the list and say, hey, these are the folks most recently installed solar and batteries in my town, and this is the installer they used. I'm going to go reach out to them. It doesn't give you the address for residential. That's a privacy issue. You can also go to the township and ask for those permits because that's public information. But if you know some of these people, or you can just go through it and figure out how many people have installed solar with batteries in my town and what installer did they use, might give you a good sense of who a good installer is. The website is in the last presentation. I can cut it out and send it around to Steve, and he can distribute it to everybody.
Okay, thanks. David, this may just be a comment. I had success with the Ego battery generator during a recent power outage by powering my refrigerator, freezer, and gas furnace with blower.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a relatively cheap way. I think they cost $1,000 and the batteries maybe $1,000, a little less, more or less. It's a less expensive way to get familiar with batteries. They were, and you could park that thing inside and run it inside. You can never run a diesel generator or natural gas generator inside your house. So cool.
Okay. Here's another comment. I think it's actually a comment to the Hohokus situation. We have 2 Tesla batteries in our garage in Ocean Township. So that's proof of his existence, at least. This is from Molly.
Yeah, code. I mean, the section of the code in New Jersey says you can install them. I don't know what the municipality is saying. That's
Okay.
something to take up with DCA.
And here, Kathy is asking, can you talk about the smart electrical panels, SPAN, SPAN panels, and how they can help you manage your battery use?
Maybe Steve.
that might be a hard
Yeah,
question.
the smart panels are just, managing, it's a little above my expertise, but smart panels are just managing load. So they're shifting what's on and what's not on, which extends the load of your batteries. So, right.
Okay.
I don't really have the answer, but the answer was in our Q&A in a session a couple of months ago, where we were talking about SPAN and what it does for us. And we can put that into our notes.
We'll have to look back and find the question.
But we can put that into our notes when we send out the recording and our Q&A.
Okay, write that down. Okay, Bob asks, are the portable battery systems displayed safe? For example, to be placed in ordinary household rooms, best stored at room temp? Question. I believe they must be charged at more than freezing, 32 Fahrenheit, at least some of them.
Yeah, I have an ego. It's in the garage. The batteries charge. You know, yeah, I never charge them in 32 degrees. Yeah, just like batteries, they have to be taken care of. You can't have them in excess heat. You can't have them in excess cold. Um, I run my ego inside in the garage. And I've charged the batteries in the garage too. So um, it's just like anything else that has a battery, just like your cell phone or your laptop. There are things you want to make sure the battery is safe and contained, um, and less problems with smaller battery types than larger battery systems with thermal runaways. But they are, lithium ion batteries that are going to have those thermal issues.
Okay, this is another comment from Kathy, who was the person that asked about the span. I just installed solar batteries and span smart panel. If anyone wants the name of the contractor, I totally recommend him. The whole team was amazing.
Cool.
So I don't know how.
Kathy, could you please give us the name of the contractor, maybe in either in the chat or email back? That would be helpful, and we can put it into our notes of contractors that we refer.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right. Let's see. Nicholas says, thanks for the presentation. You mentioned we don't have hourly pricing for retail customers in New Jersey. It seems to me that having hourly pricing means a lot to the attraction of installing a battery. Do you expect us to have hourly pricing at some point in the near future?
Those are part of the things that they're under discussion in the grid mod um, proceeding that BPU is having about whether they do that. There's downsides to that. So if you have time of use pricing and the electricity goes up in the summertime, you're paying 20, 30, 40, 50, $1 a kilowatt hour on a time of use pricing. So it can also, go the other way where, you can charge your vehicle when prices are 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So you have to think about, and I put this slide up, you have to think about the downside of all these technologies and put that all together. So we can't just think about the upside. Um, you know, the question that Bob had, what's the performance? What's the safety issues? We have to think about those things. If we're going to have a truly sustainable system, we have to deal with the downside of these technologies and try to put the systems together to maximize the benefits. But don't gloss over the negative sides of these things. They're not just 100%, all great stuff and it's all clean energy. There are some downsides that we need to minimize those impacts if we're going to have a truly sustainable, clean energy system. So it's my
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, which I think is going to lead right into Steve's presentation. Um, but before I ask it, let me just say that we had promised that we would have an Ask the Coaches live session after this. So if you have a question that you think could be answered in real time by one of our coaches, we have about 7 or 8 in the audience right now. Then be writing that in the chat, and after Steve finishes and we take whatever questions there are for him, then we'll do some ask the coaches live questions. There's also something in here, people who are interested in this span device. Jonathan has pulled out a bunch of facts about it, and rather than reading that, you can go into the chat and look at it if you're interested. So here's the last question for Mike. GM makes an EV charger capable of V2H bidirectional charger that they say is compatible with GM EVs. Wouldn't the charger be compatible with any EV capable of V2H, or is there a spec for compatibility between bidirectional chargers and EVs? Now that I read that question, I think Steve is going to cover that in his
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah.
I can tell you this, you'll see my talk, and they may be hardware compatible, but not software. They don't have the same signaling. So GM is totally different than the other competitors. And
just
I'll
your
show you this
charging-
in the charts.
Just your charging technology, there's no standard. Like Tesla has its own charging technology to other EVs. So that is a key point that needs to be standardized. With that, I'm going to stop my screen share and turn it over to you, Steve.
Oh, I have to start sharing just a minute.
So compared to Mike's presentation, mine is a hodgepodge of different data and pictures, and my talk doesn't have standard graphics on every page. But I'm trying to, in the next 11 slides, I will try to point out what the story is currently with auto manufacturers. And my slides just disappeared. Hold on. Here we go. So this is the first introduction, and it's just covering the fact that when power goes out, what can you do for your house? We have neighbors, in fact, a number of neighbors. So when the power goes out, they are very noisy. Across the valley behind us, we have creeks behind us, and just about every house has a generator. They all build up and they're very noisy. So I know when their power goes out, even if mine doesn't, I know that they are now on backup. The second would be to have a gas generator. And in fact, most of them probably are gas. Generac is probably the most prominent. And I know they have to be maintained frequently. So you pay some annual charge, even though they're infrequently used. But the newer options is what we're talking about tonight. Mike talked extensively about having stationary battery storage. The newest thing is that we have EVs that now are non-stationary storage, and they can provide the battery can provide this almost the whole home system, or just plugging in your extension cord into the outlets on the vehicle and provide vehicle to load. So there are many different, if you look at a Google search, you're going to find many bloggers, many YouTube recordings on these newer options. Many of the references are in the last slide of this package, which will be out and will be live on our. I'll send an email with all the slides. So the EV manufacturers are jumping for joy with the idea that using the EV to supply backup power to the house during grid failure has a market potential to increase their own sales of their own EV brand. There are current standards being drafted or probably are in place on interconnecting mobile batteries, non-stationary, well, there are standards being created for non-stationary storage, but right now it's every man for himself. I think the auto manufacturers, and you'll see the data, are using this as a profitable opportunity, and now they're testing the market. So let's go on to the next slide. This may look like a quite busy slide. Just do a little summary for you. Vehicle to load, V2L, is the initial use of mobile storage. When you need power, you just plug your extension cord into 120 volt on your car or your pickup and power what you wish. And the Ford Lightning is featured probably as a workhouse of choice for contractors who can take their car anywhere and they have power. They can plug into their pickup and then use their outdoor tools wherever they are located. The V2H, however, requires, as a vehicle to house, requires a bi-directional charger that's mounted on your house. Normally that charger delivers house electricity to charge the EV, but the software signaling on these proprietary interfaces allows a bi-directional charger to reverse this. And now the EV can deliver electricity to power the house during power outages. So this chart shows 6 EV manufacturers and 2 others that I added in. Tesla, for instance, has both vehicle to load and vehicle to house, and they have a proprietary standard between the EV Tesla and that charger on the house. The other one proprietary is the Ford, also both vehicle to load by plugging the extensions and vehicle to house. And finally, General Motors, and I spent probably an hour or so exploring General Motors and their material and their talking to their salespeople. They have both vehicle to load and vehicle to house. They say that the 2026 models, which now are coming out, and that's next year models, will all be compatible with their standard charger, bi-directional charger. They have 7 different brands under the GM manufacturer level. So there's a lot of manufacturing, a lot of different models will be proprietary and here for General Motors. Now, what's going to happen is that you become locked into that brand of General Motors. Well, not actually, in the whole General Motors product, you can go from one brand to another, but you're locked into General Motors for the hardware you have on your house, which only accepts the GM protocol. And the same is true of Ford, and the same is true of Tesla. That's where they want it to be, so they lock you in. And it's probably for the life of the equipment you have is on the side of your house, required to power your house from your EV. I'm going to show you that detail in the next several slides. Next slide. So this is a very simple case. This is Hyundai Group. It's has 2 different models. The legacy EVs and the simple eGMP has only vehicle to load, and it uses this adapter, and the outlet provides 15 amps you plug in there, and that's about 1.6 kilowatts. So next slide. Volkswagen now has a pilot project in Sweden. It's vehicle to house. And the website indicates it utilizes a bi-directional charging standard. So that's good news. Maybe Volkswagen is doing something that other manufacturers can use. The car's battery, they say, takes over the main energy supply for the house when the home storage system requires additional energy. So that implies that there is a home battery, and that could be important because when the grid goes down, you need to have something to get started with all the stuff working properly. I'll talk about that in a second. The next slide. The Rivian has just a whole host of outlets. Most of these are USB. There's 3 12-volt outlets. There's 1 120-volt outlet. And now they have a bi-directional charger to power your house. Next slide. And here is Ford. Their traditional is vehicle to load is the picture on the right with those extension cords running out to that guy. Craft person has it looks like a circular saw in his hand. And I think this multi-power outlet is called the Ford Pro Power Onboard. which allows, I think it might even have a 240-volt outlet. I'm not sure. That on the left is the vehicle to house Ford home backup. Again, it's using the charging port on the vehicle, and then a protocol that's proprietary to itself to the house bi-directional charger. Next. So GM is really playing up with ads the fact that GM EVs are more than just a ride. They send power back to your home. Is power out in your in your neighborhood, it says? GM can provide power to your properly equipped home in a blackout. Next slide. Here, GM says, tap into an amazing source of backup power. I've used this site to view their various animations, and also they allowed personal communications with the two agents who supplied me with more information on the GM plans. I love this because on the lower right of this ad on the website is a fireplace where the fireplace is glowing, and where the lighting intensity changes with time. And so it's a cool. It says, tap into an amazing source of backup power with GM. Next slide. So this is the GM product line. And there's three pictures. I want to take you first starting on the right. They do have what is equivalently a wall battery. That's the GM Energy Power Bank. The $7,300 price seems very reasonable. Of course, this, though, is independent of vehicle-to-house capability for GM. The middle chart shows, I wanted to show you only one thing, which is the bi-directional charger. This is a whopping big device. It handles 80 watts, 80 amps, which is 19.2 kilowatts. Bi-directional. Price is $1,700, so it's quite expensive. But if with 80 amps, if many of you may have a 100 amp panel in your house, probably this 80 amp reverse charging to power your house will handle your whole house. You won't really need to have we won't need to have pre-dedicated circuits that are powered by your backup. I wanted to now take you to the left, which shows how the whole system is connected. There are two major boxes for EV to power the house. The inverter here switches the DC from the EV to AC power. It's just like the inverter that's used in solar panels for those who have solar panels on their rooftop. Then on the far left is the Energy Home Hub. This is actually a transfer switch. I'll call it a transfer switch. That's required when the grid is down to isolate the house from the grid. You saw Mike's diagrams showing a transfer between the two. But this home hub requires an electrician, in fact, this whole assembly does, to select and wire the most essential parts of your house when the grid fails. And surprise here is this smallish in the center dark start battery. It detects the power outage, and it's a device that begins to give initial power to the rest of these systems. Now, the total cost for this set of equipment is $5,600, plus the $1,700 for the bi-directional charger, plus the optional wall battery if you want it. And that's a cost of about, what, $7,300? But the labor to install all this thing is actually bigger than the cost of equipment. GM recommends Q Merit, I believe is the company, which they say is nationwide. And their prices, I was told, are between $7,000 and $13,000 just for the labor to install all this equipment. So that was really a big surprise to me. Hopefully this is understandable. Let me go on to the next slide. Now, this is where the industry is going. The Maryland Drive Act enables various energy sources, distributed energy resources, to be added to the grid. And one of those is the car EV charge can help power the grid. So this could be on demand when the grid needs it. And the Baltimore Gas and Electric this summer will be running the initial trial. And this is all a result of the Maryland, what's it called? The Drive Act that was passed in 2024 that allows these distributed energy resources planning ahead where they're going to need it in the next few years. That is where the industry is going, and the final graph. In this package are the references, and on various slides you'll see the references as well. So once I send these out, you can look up for yourself and discover the amazing properties you can have from your electric vehicle to either power loads by directly plugging the extension cords or by powering your house. And in the future, powering the grid. And now I'm open to questions.
Okay. Let me look. All right, Kathy did send her contractor that she's recommending, who is Chris Deming at
Thank you,
Reliable
Kathy.
Solar and Roofing.
We will add him to our list of reliable contractors, referred
Okay.
contractors.
Mark says, more of an FYI, I installed an EcoFlow portable expandable battery and smart panel for my older parents' home and electrifying their stove. They had 2 fires with the gas stove in less than 12 months. That's why you shouldn't have a gas stove. They love it. They love the induction cooktop and the EcoFlow system. The EcoFlow is a portable expandable battery and smart panel. Okay. Sue says, how about Lucid?
I can answer that if you want. This is David Kahn. I
Sure.
was looking to purchase a Lucid Air Pure, and Lucid has a bi-directional charger announced that's supposed to first ship on January 15th, which was yesterday. As of today, their webpage still says expected to ship. Now, that charger, which I guess according to Steve would be proprietary to Lucid, is only hardware ready, they say, and not software ready. They have to sell you something else in the near future. So bottom line is Lucid is not quite ready, but in the works.
Is Lucid a GM brand?
No, Lucid
What
is a
is it?
startup of their own. It's
Okay.
an independent company.
Oh, thank you, David. Kathy points out this is especially useful for the California residents among you. An additional benefit of home storage is the ability to run your well if there's a fire and the grid gets shut down. That could be very useful. All right, Jeffrey says, this question is for either of you. I was really surprised to see Tesla as the cheapest battery supplier per kilowatt hour. Is this a recent change?
Yeah, that is on Mike Winka's chart, and maybe you could pop it up there. But I was also surprised, although they're pretty close in price. It used just, what was it, a 10 kilowatt battery as a standard or something. They were actually pretty close in price, around that $10,000 range. Some were a little bit higher, some were a little bit lower, and Tesla was pretty low. I agree.
Okay, Betsy says, and she gives the link. I found the NJBPU solar project activity reports, and it's right here in the chat for anybody who wants to look at that.
Thank you, Betsy.
Okay. And Molly said Tesla supply and demand.
That's
She
true.
doesn't say this, but I said, what do you expect? Okay, Mark says, great stuff, Steve. It's fascinating that we're slowly shifting from hesitation to buy an EV because it won't go the distance to now your car has the benefit to power your whole home for a short time. Great, small steps forward. All right, I don't see any other questions for our coaches. Does anybody want to just go off mute and ask a question? Well, we have 6 minutes. We could go into a question or two that has come up in the course of our coaching, if you would like. Do any of the coaches have a question that they think would be interesting to the audience? Aaron has a question.
Yes, I tuned in late, so pardon me if this has already been discussed, but I'm wondering what is the status of retrofits to those of us who have, like I have a 2017 Chevy Bolt. Will there be a way for me to participate in vehicle to load or vehicle to grid with any kind of a retrofit?
Then Mike just put up a slide.
Well, that's for something if there's a lull in the conversation, but it has nothing to do with the question that was asked.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure we have an answer for that.
I'm sure they're going to figure out a way to be able to do that with your vehicle, because those vehicles are going to last for 10, 15 years. And those battery systems in there are probably 100,000 plus mile life. So there'll probably be some sort of retrofit for that. I haven't seen them talk about that because it's new systems now they're talking about. So.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I could throw in a comment there in terms of vehicle to load. I have heard of people installing inverters
Yep.
on their
You can
car
do-
batteries so that you could
Yep.
directly power like a refrigerator during a power outage or something like that.
Yeah, as long as you're doing that not in parallel with the grid. So you have a transfer switch, you can do just about anything as long as you're, disconnected from the grid. It's gonna may impact your warranty on your car, but you can Google a whole bunch of YouTube stuff where people are saying all of those things. And as long as you're not like I said, running in parallel with the grid, it's just like adding a natural gas generator or a diesel generator. And in some cases, they want you to tell them what you're doing. In most cases, yeah, as long as you're not connected. So.
And so all I would need then in that case is to get an inverter that connects to the car battery?
I think it wouldn't be a direct, simple, it's not like just plugging it in. I think you would have to find the right place to connect it to. So it's a kind of a DIY sort of situation, I think.
Okay.
I would just YouTube, Google, search, see if somebody's already gone and done that.
Okay.
I put up a slide just to.
Have you heard from Chevy? We just got a EV Blazer in June, and they came out with a Tesla adapter, so now I can charge at a Tesla charge port. So I think they might have, they will be rolling out different things. So
Yeah, so Tesla
keep
came out
talking
with
to
its own
Chevy.
charging every GM had CHAdeMO, and then they had conversion systems for your EVs. They're going to do the same thing with grid to load. You're going to have these adapters, and then what happens is people will get frustrated. You're going to have a standard. It's all going to be standardized across the board, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
I just threw up this slide just to, we have to start thinking about how we put these things together. So this is just, a used EV for under $20,000 runs, 5 days a week versus an EV. The electric vehicle, uses 4,000 kilowatt hours per year to run that 50 miles. The combustion vehicle uses just over 500 gallons. So when you do that conversion, it's 60 million BTUs the combustion vehicle uses, and the EV uses 13. So 4 times more efficient. In the EV, you're saving, about $1,000 a year. But if you put a 3.5 kW system on your roof, you generate enough electricity, run your EV, and you're saving, all of that energy cost, $1,500 a year at these prices, avoiding all of that electricity. And your payback period on both of those things is 15 years for the used vehicle and the solar. So, as we start to talk about going down the path of coaching, we have to start to talk about how we put all of these technologies together. It's not just heat pumps over here, EVs over here, storage over here. It's all about integrating these technologies and using the benefits of all of that together, linked together. So just a little promo for integrated energy systems.
I have a couple more comments in the chat that I'll just go through. After Kathy talked about running your well when there's a fire, which will someday happen in New Jersey with climate change. Mike Winka said that well pumps have a large surge startup power needs. And Kathy said, but you can manage that within the span panel. Mark says, Michael, I think your comment that there are drawbacks as well was very important. Nothing is perfect, but renewable energy, energy efficiency, electrification are all steps forward, not perfect, but better and getting better. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Absolutely. But my point was, the downside, people point to the downsides. Oh, you're building it with an EV, with electric vehicles, and they have mining impacts. Well, we're addressing that. We have sustainable mining, so you got to think about the drawbacks on this to make it perfect. That's more of the point is, yeah, we are taking these steps to make it better, but don't forget the downsides and be able to answer those questions when they come up. So, hey, what's the end of life for solar panels? What's the end of life for batteries? What's the recycling option for batteries? Because then the other side is going to point out, oh, yeah, that's great, but what happens when you just throw them in the landfill? Well, no, we have a recycling option for that, and here's how we're doing that. So we have to be prepared to answer those questions, and the best way to prepare is to face those issues and to respond to them.
That's exactly right, Mike. That's it's really important, and it's everything's complex, right? There's no easy answers to everything, and to yeah, I agree fully.
Also,
Okay,
I'd like to offer a quick perspective that has helped me kind of think about what's going on now. I think that, we've been living in a society where fossil fuels have been enormously subsidized, largely invisibly because we don't really see those subsidies. And so it's been politically toxic to try to remove those subsidies. It's been difficult, if not impossible, to do that. So what's happening now is that we're essentially getting subsidies for electrification in the form of the IRA and whatnot to kind of match the subsidies that we haven't been able to politically remove on the side of the fuels.
Yeah, true.
That's right. And I'll just make a comment. I mean, there's some of this stuff is intuitive. It's true that mining batteries, mining the nickel and everything is got fossil fuels involved. But think about, all, getting gas to your car. There's trucking that gets it there, to power your EV, although right now it's still coming grossly from fossil fuels. Over time it won't, and to deliver that energy over the grid to power your EVs is going to be less energy intensive than trucking a fluid somewhere or piping a fluid somewhere over time, right? So there's lots of intuitive great benefits. Of course, there's the other stuff, and what you just said, Mike, yeah, we're going to make mining more sustainable over time, right? They're going to be EV tractors over time, right? So that's, it's all slow steps towards progress, which is, the important part.
Right. And that's the important part for us is we have to say, yeah, I want that lithium to be mined sustainable. We can't just accept it that we have impacts, even though it's a lot better. So exactly what you said. So cool.
I think we should call it here. It's about 8:20. I thank you
Yeah.
very much, Mike, for the great talk. What we'll plan to do is to send out the recording and the slides and the questions and answers in the next few days. So you'll have that. Also, all the links to all the references will be in that collection. I would want to put a little plug in for our February 16th Building Electrification webinar. We'll have a couple that is going to be talking about their electrification journey for their house. It'll be a number of different electrification topics, I think, that they've done and will continue as they electrify their house. I think that we'll find that very entertaining. That's 7 p.m. February 16th.
And thank everybody for your participation. This was really, really good. Thank you.